You are pulled into the driveway. The engine is off. The headlights cut out, throwing the dashboard into shadow. Inside the house, the lights are on. The people who love you are waiting. The life you spent years working, planning, and exhausting yourself to build is sitting right on the other side of that front door. But you don't get out of the car. Instead, you sit in the dark. You pull out your phone. You check an email you've already read. You look for a problem to solve, a fire to put out, anything to fill the sudden, heavy silence that settled over you the moment the engine stopped. You feel this strange, vibrating restlessness, a quiet dread that tells you that going inside and just being is the hardest thing you could possibly be asked to do. This isn't a lack of love, it is not selfishness, and it is not a lack of gratitude. It is a pattern, and it has a very specific psychological blueprint. We are taught that the story of Odysseus, the legendary king who spent 10 years fighting the Trojan War and another 10 years trying to get home, is a story of survival. We view him as a man desperately clawing his way back to his wife, his son, and his kingdom, thwarted only by angry gods and terrible monsters. But if you look closely at his choices, a different psychology emerges. Odysseus took 10 years to get home because safety was the one thing his nervous system could not handle. The struggle was predictable, the war was clear, but peace? Peace meant facing the quiet. In the next 10 minutes, we are going to look at the psychology of the runner. We will examine why men who are built for the battle struggle so deeply with the peace, and what happens when the very mechanisms that kept you alive start keeping you homeless. To understand the modern runner, we have to look at what this pattern looks like on the surface. You are likely the person everyone turns to when things go wrong. In a crisis, you are calm, direct, and completely focused. Your mind sharpens when the pressure rises. You are highly capable, highly driven, and you have probably built a life that looks from the outside like a series of victories. But there is a specific kind of quiet that men who carry this pattern develop. It is a state where you are present in the room, but nowhere near the conversation. You can answer questions, laugh at the right moments, and complete your tasks, but no one can tell that you haven't fully arrived in days. You are constantly scanning the horizon for the next project, the next milestone, the next potential disaster. If there is no conflict to resolve, you feel a subtle, creeping anxiety. You might find yourself picking small fights with your partner, overanalyzing a minor comment from your boss, or suddenly deciding that you need to completely restructure your finances at midnight on a Tuesday. This is not coldness. Coldness is an absence of feeling. It is the opposite. It is the overwhelming presence of internal noise with no mechanism to process it. You have learned to translate all of your emotional energy into motion. To you, stopping doesn't feel like rest. Stopping feels like danger. When Odysseus was offered a life of immortal ease with the goddess Calypso, a paradise where he would never have to fight, suffer, or run again, he sat on the shore every day, weeping, staring out at the barren sea. We are told he was mourning his home, but when he finally left that paradise, he didn't sail straight back to Ithaca. He picked more fights, he taunted the Cyclops, he sought out the sirens. He chose the storm over and over again. And here is where the myth becomes a mirror. Because the reason this happens, the actual psychological mechanism that keeps a man running is almost never what we assume. In clinical psychology, this behavior is closely linked to a state known as adaptive hypervigilance. Here is what that means in plain terms. When you spend a formative part of your life in an environment where safety is unpredictable, your brain adapts to keep you alive. That environment might have been a childhood home with an unstable parent, an early career of intense, high-stakes pressure, or a prolonged period of financial survival. To survive, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, takes over. It learns to keep your nervous system in a constant state of low-grade arousal. Your heart rate, your cortisol levels, and your focus are permanently dialed up. In a crisis, this is a superpower. You survive, you win, you build the kingdom. But what happens when the crisis ends? What happens when you finally reach the quiet shores of the life you fought to build? Your prefrontal cortex registers that the threat is gone. It tells you, you are safe now. You can relax. It tells you, you are safe now. You can relax. But your amygdala does not speak that language. To a highly conditioned nervous system, sudden quiet does not feel like safety. It feels like an ambush. When the noise of the battle stops, the silence becomes deafening. Because in the silence, your brain no longer has an external target to focus on. And when there is no external target, the focus turns inward. That is when the ghosts catch up. That is when the grief, the exhaustion, and the unresolved pain you had to ignore to survive the journey begin to surface. To avoid feeling those things, your nervous system demands a distraction. It demands a new battle. Clinicians consistently observe this pattern in high-achieving men. They do not run because they want to leave. They run because staying still forces them to meet themselves. That's the mechanism. Let that sit for a moment. Think back to the driveway, the checking of the phone, the reluctance to step inside. That is not a lack of desire for peace. It is your nervous system treating the quiet of your own home as an emotional threat. You are operating on an ancient survival-based logic. If I keep moving, nothing can catch me. But this survival logic carries a heavy, compounding tax. First, consider the relational cost. The people close to a modern Odysseus do not see his internal battle. They only see his absence. To a partner, your restlessness looks like rejection. When you cannot sit quietly at the dinner table without checking your phone, or when every vacation must be packed with activities to keep your mind occupied, they assume that they are not enough to hold your attention. They assume that if you truly loved them, you would be content to just be with them. They do not understand that your inability to be present is not a reflection of your feelings for them, but a reflection of your relationship with your own mind. They feel lonely next to you, and eventually they stop trying to reach you across the gap. Then there is the internal cost. When you live your life as a series of campaigns, you lose access to the very feelings you are fighting to protect. You cannot selectively numb your emotions. When you numb the capacity to feel fear, grief, and exhaustion, you also numb the capacity to feel joy, satisfaction, and connection. You build the house, but you cannot feel the warmth of the fire. You achieve the goal, but the satisfaction lasts for 5 minutes before the familiar hollow hunger returns, demanding the next target. If this pattern goes unexamined, the trajectory is predictable. You see it in men in their late 40s and 50s who have conquered their professional worlds, yet carry a profound, unshakable emptiness. They have spent decades running, convinced that the next port, the next victory, or the next project will finally be the one that allows them to rest. But it never is, because you can't find peace in a place you are using as an escape hatch. Without realizing it, you become like the older Odysseus of later legends, unable to endure the quiet of Ithaca, looking at his aging wife and his peaceful kingdom, only to realize he has forgotten how to live without the weight of an oar in his hand. He sails out into the dark ocean once more, not because he has somewhere to go, but because he has forgotten how to stay. None of this is a sentence. It is a starting point. And understanding it is a different kind of starting point than most men ever get. We looked at what this restlessness actually is, not a sign of high ambition, but a nervous system trapped in the momentum of past survival. We traced it back to the psychological mechanisms of adaptive hypervigilance, where safety is misread as a threat. And we sat with the quiet, heavy cost this pattern extracts from our relationships and our internal lives. The thing worth carrying from this is that your inability to rest was never a character defect. It was a solution. It was a brilliant, highly effective solution that a younger version of you built to get you through a difficult harbor. It kept you alive. It got you to where you are today. But you are no longer in that storm. The war is over. The home you built is real. and the hardest, bravest journey you have left to take is not across another ocean, but across that driveway, through the front door, and into the quiet of your own life. If this perspective resonated with you, the next video on this channel covers the specific psychology of emotional exhaustion in high-performing men and how to retrain a nervous system that has forgotten how to feel safe. Subscribing ensures you won't miss it when it drops. Take a breath, put the car in park, and when you're ready, go inside.